Well, hello there. It's the Charlie and Linda Show. Welcome to Bloom Talks. And today we're going to be talking about keeping passion alive in your relationship. And I want you just to take a moment to reflect on what you understand that to be. When you hear the word passion, what is it that you think of? Like the word intimacy, for a lot of us, it links to the idea of sexuality, which certainly can be a part of passion and intimacy. But passion really is about much more than sexual pleasure, and it certainly can include that, but it's really about feeling. It's a feeling of fullness, of intensity, of aliveness that isn't always pleasurable. It can be, often it is, but it has to do with the quality and the intensity of feeling. So today we're going to be talking about how do we create and maintain and build on passion in our relationship in the face of so many other conflicting commitments and responsibilities, and how we can manage to honor those responsibilities and at the same time not neglect our desire for desire. Anything you want to say about that?
Oh yeah, I've got plenty to say. This is one of my favorite subjects here.
I'm surprised. I had no idea that you would have anything to say about that.
So Charlie's talking about passion, and of course there's a part of passion in relationship that is sexual and a part that isn't sexual, and they tend to dovetail. They tend to go together. If we have a relationship that's passionate in general, it's likely that the sexual passion stays alive and well over the years. If we have a sexually passionate relationship, it tends to feed the larger part of the relationship that will have vitality and aliveness. And we often get a question from students in our classes, clients that we see, how important is the sexual aspect of a relationship? And I always say to them that in my experience and the many people that I've worked with for over 40 years and the research that Charlie and I have done with Secrets of Great Marriages for the second book that we wrote, there's consistent reports that sex is an important aspect of relationship. And these older couples who are in their 80s reported to us that it was still a really important part of their relationship, although their bodies had changed over time, that they were still keeping that aspect of passion alive in their life, which was enlivening for me to hear. So I have a little joke for you that I think is an important one to consider, just because it's funny and it gives us a giggle, but also because it's got a teaching aspect to it. And it's about a couple who, when they were very new together in love, falling in love and in lust together, they were seated in a restaurant and there was an older couple seated next to them. And they looked over at the older couple, and the older couple was a little bit dull. They weren't really talking to each other very much. And one of the young couples says, I bet they don't have sex anymore. I bet they've forgotten all about it and they don't enjoy it anymore. Let's not forget how important sexuality is to us right now. And they decided that they were going to have a key word, so that when they got older, if they had drifted into some complacency about sex and it had fallen by the by, that they were going to alert each other to get that back into their repertoire. And they decided on the word super sex. So years go by, and the woman remembers that they haven't had sex in a long time. So she gets all dolled up, and she fixes her hair, and she puts on makeup, and she gets her nicest peach of lingerie, and she comes out and she presents herself to her husband, and she says, super sex. And he says, what's the soup? So he's more interested in the culinary pleasures than he is the pleasures of the body. But I believe that this woman didn't let that stop her, that she persisted and she continued to assert herself, and they were able to pull that piece that was such an important part of their relationship for so many years out of mothballs and revive it and have that part of joy back into their relationship. And I think the joke, as well as a lot of the research that's out, is that it's a really important part of relationship not to be neglected. I just want to say that there usually is one in the pair who isn't as highly motivated to be lovers as the other. And that's typical because the opposites attract. But if it's important to your partner, it's important. So the person who is the high desire person, they have lessons in patience, and the lower desire person has lessons in generosity. But to really stretch into each other's world so that it doesn't fall off of the agenda altogether.
So, yeah, let that joke be a cautionary tale for those of you who are neglecting the passionate or sexual side of your relationship, because it could happen to you, or it could happen even worse, it could happen to your partner. And one or both of you could actually prefer a nice hot bowl of minestrone to a roll in the hay. So we're gonna talk a little bit about how you can avoid that from becoming a possibility in your life. So number one is to recognize the depth of your appreciation and enjoyment of intimate, sexual, passionate connection. Because when we really affirm that to ourselves, when we remind ourselves of how that revitalizes us and how much that means, it helps us to keep in mind that we need to maintain that we need to take care of that aspect of our lives and of the relationship. So we're not doing it out of a feeling of obligation, but we're doing it out of our own enlightened self-interest. That's something that we really value and we want to support. We want to feed that. We want to strengthen it. We want to maintain it. We want to grow it even. And one of the things that we found out in our work with couples over the last several decades, yes, it has been that long, but one of the things that we found is that even people well into the third trimester of their lives, 70s, 80s, 90s even, still can get a lot of pleasure out of passionate connection.
So I want to back up our claim. This isn't just Charlie and Linda Bloom saying it, and it's not just our research, which only had 100 people in it, so it's considered anecdotal research. But I want to back it up with Backflower. And Backflower is in Warwick, England, and their population was 16,000 people. And they study happiness in all different forms. What is it that brings happiness to people? And one of the things that they found is that the people who reported that they were having the most sex were the happiest people in their studies. And they found that when they compared the people who changed from sex once a week to once once a month to once a week, and they upped the frequency, that was tantamount to having a $50,000 a year increase in their annual income.
So if you up it to 5 times a day, that's the equivalent to $1.5 million
No,
that you could, no?
I think that would be a little excessive.
Well,
But the research shows that a lot of sex is correlated with happiness. So the people who are having the most sex are the happiest ones. So it's not about the financial gain. It's not about the degrees, job satisfaction. This is an essential cornerstone of people's happiness. But they often are putting their time and energy elsewhere.
I just want to make a comment here. It's not just about the frequency or the number of times.
Quality.
It is about the quality of the experience.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not a matter of just kind of checking that off on your calendar, but it's really about what is the quality of experience that you're having when you're intimate in that way with each other, and what are the things that enhance that quality, and what are the things that can diminish it.
Yes. The other piece of research that I love so much is Acevedo. And she's in New York at Stony Brook University. And she's in the psychology department. And she and some of her colleagues were hepped up on this new way of doing research where they do the MRI imaging of people's brains. And they look and see which parts of the brains light up. And so they had pictures.
MRI meaning more regular intimacy?
No.
Oh.
It's the imaging. It's the brain
that
imaging.
MRI. Okay.
So they had pictures of longtime friends and casual friends and the beloved lover. And not much lit up in the brain when they looked at the, casual friends or even the longtime devoted friends. But when the romantic partner with whom they were having sexual and emotional intimacy, the brain lit up like the newlyweds. And so I love that piece of research because it's showing that the belief that the best is at the beginning of the relationship and the falling in love when, you're hormonally really jazzed up, that is the part that is going to give you the intense pleasure. But these people were together an average of 21 years. So these were not the newlyweds, and their brains were still lighting up. So I think it's important about our belief system. If we believe that we can keep romance, sexual pleasure, and eroticism alive over the decades, it is possible with that kind of a belief system and that intention. So I thought Acevedo's research was great to blow up the myth about the older couples, that they're just friends and have warm companionate kind of relationships. Not necessarily so, but you have to believe.
You got to believe. So, no, this is not a religious revival, so don't worry. We're not going to go get spiritual on you. But it does
I
have...
can get a little fanatical about this. I noticed that.
Yeah.
I
noticed that you noticed. Yeah.
In a good way.
Yeah, I think that fanaticism is highly underrated. So, yeah. So what does that mean? Like, if you do see that as a genuine possibility, and you're not possessed by this ridiculous belief that is so prevalent in this culture, that beyond a certain age, people outgrow the need for sex or the desire for it, or it's just not really worth the effort. You've got to conserve your energy when you get to a certain point in your life, and you don't want to waste it on things that that you don't think are really going to give you a big return. So first one, like Linda said, is to challenge that expectation, that belief that, those good times are over and we just have to make do with, you got to go through some stages where you lose some of the pleasures that you once had in life. That's not necessarily true, but it does become a self-fulfilling prophecy. It does tend to become one when you basically have developed that belief and then you've created evidence in your life to validate it. Like you see people who don't really or who claim not to be very sexual anymore, or you gather evidence that that's just not much of a possibility. So to be willing to recognize and challenge some of those beliefs that you have. And Linda made reference to our second book, The Secrets of Great Marriages, in which several of the couples that we interviewed were well into their 80s, and all of them continued to experience very fulfilling, passionate lives together. And they also all acknowledge that they've had to make some adjustments in terms of the physical aspects of that, but that basically the pleasure that they were able to give and receive with each other was still very strong, because they both shared that intention to keep it alive.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have that belief that that's not a realistic possibility, then it's hard to have an intention to really strive for something that you don't think is possible.
So you're using the word intention, and
Yeah.
this is so important. If you have an intention to keep the sexual passion of your relationship alive over time, you will be committed to devising creative ways to keep that sparkle on your relationship.
Where there's a will, there's a way.
And
What my
we are
grandfather used to
blessed
say.
to have people tell us about very personal parts of their life, the sexual aspect of their life, about what's working and what doesn't working. And they come in sometimes to see us and the relationship is sort of sluggish and dull and worn or absent, and how they perk it up. One of the things is designated time, to make sure that you have time to devote to being lovers with each other, and that there's an abundance of time so you don't feel rushed. Because to transition from the workaday, responsible mindset into a more relaxed, playful, creative expression is, for some of us, hard to get out of the old mindset of being a human doing and being into a human being. So to designate some time, and there's some people who are resistant to this, and they said, I don't want to have date book sex. I want to have spontaneous sex. And I always tell them, you can have spontaneous sex too, but if you wait to have spontaneous sex, you may be going a long time. You may be going weeks and not have any sex. Have some designated time and add in the spontaneous. And make sure that the designated time is in a time of day that works for you. Maybe you're sluggish early in the morning, or maybe you're rushing off to work or the gym early in the morning, and maybe you're tired after the work day, so that's not your best time on a day that you're not working, to carve out some time to be together in a sensual way and see where that goes. Maybe you take a shower together and you soap each other up, and you're not really trying to get clean. You're just trying to get in your body and to have the other person be in the body, and you're slip sliding around on the water and the soap. And that can be really erotic. A bubble bath can be too, and take plenty of time. If you're in the tub for a long time and the water gets cold, let some of the cold water out, put some more hot water in there, because relaxing and transitioning into lover's mode can make all the difference. Do you have a few hot tips for people about transitioning to let the lover's part of their relationship be high priority for them?
No.
I've got more.
Well, actually, I do. Um, this is something more for the men, not because I'm sexist, but because what we've seen over the years is that men often tend to have this issue, which is that as soon as there's anything physical that is pleasurable or stimulating, like being in the shower together, or rubbing each other's back even, that can create an expectation and a desire of, okay, this is foreplay. We know where that's going to go.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's nothing wrong with that, except if you move into that mode and all of a sudden it's not about the experiencing the pleasure of the moment, of the touch, of the sensation, but it's about, oh, this is a means to an end. You're no longer fully present, and the other person is very likely to sense that. Now, I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with getting stimulated and aroused and wanting it to go on.
But what goes up will come down.
Yeah, in more ways than one. So the concern that I have here is not so much about whether or not you get stimulated, whether or not you have desires, but whether those desires turn into attachments and expectations, and then it becomes about getting there, which means that if we don't, I'm not okay,
Mm-hmm.
because I've already decided that that's where we're going to go, because my body is telling me this, and therefore we have to go there. So the challenge can be, can I be stimulated? Can I be aroused? Can I enjoy this and be okay whether or not this becomes something sexual?
So that's great that you're saying not to be so goal focused, because that leaves a lot of room for emotional talking and non-sexual caressing, and that's all good.
And I'm not saying that
No,
there's anything
both
wrong with,
and.
hey, if it goes there, great.
Both and, but don't be too attached.
But because if I'm too attached, then what I'm going to experience is disappointment, which can really easily turn into
Mhm.
resentment. Even if I don't speak it, my partner can feel it.
Mm-hmm. It's all good.
And if I do that enough, and we have a pattern of me not being okay if things don't
Mhm.
go the way I want them to, then that's going to really diminish the experience that my partner has of just being appreciated and desired,
Mhm.
even if she's not interested in being sexual at those times.
Thank you. And making out is got its place, and you don't have to go all the way. And that's wonderful. And thank you for especially telling the men about that.
Yeah.
I think it's important to have a bedroom be a love nest, that there's not baskets of laundry overflowing that might be distracting, and that you might want to have music there. Maybe you want to dance. Maybe you want to dance nude. And maybe you want to have poetry. Maybe you want to have incense or some scented candles that really bring your senses alive. And there's some beautiful love poetry, some erotic poetry that can be an important part of the introduction to the lovemaking. And I'm fond of the whole idea that foreplay is everything that went on from the last time we had sex until this time. And I think that's so important, because I have a lot of women who come to me and say, when he makes an overture to me sexually, when we've just been fighting or when we've been distant and living parallel lives, it's hard for me to get on the sexual program. But when the whole context of the relationship is warm and loving, and people have been dealing with the issues so that they're not interfering, I think that's really important foreplay, is to keep the relationship in general really warmed up. Yeah.
Mm.
More ideas for people to consider?
No.
I have some more. I think it's fun to play with all for you or all for me, and that you can allow yourself to be healthily greedy, and that you can say all the things that you want, and then you reciprocate and you allow the other person to have some of all the pleasures that they want without concerning yourself about your pleasure. And that's fun, just to break up the routine, because the normal routine is a little for her, a little for him, a little for one partner, a little for the other. And it's nice just to be a gracious receiver for the whole episode.
Sometimes, people with different personalities get into entrenched cycles and patterns and routines. Like a person who generally tends to be more geared towards fulfilling the needs of other people might be in relationship with somebody who's more self-reflective and who's more focused on getting their own desires met. And those two people, if they're not mindful of some of those, of that difference, can get into a rut.
That's right.
In which there's an imbalance in there. And so it really is important to have reciprocity.
So if you're the person who tends to be more tuned into what the other person likes, and you're the one who's the giver and in service more of the time, it's important for you to tune into what you want and to go public with your prayer and let your partner know, because they probably really want to please you, but they can't read your mind.
Yeah.
I think it's wonderful to experiment with full body touch, and homemade massage is great. And just take the corn oil down off of the kitchen shelf. You don't have to have any fancy massage oils, because that's a really wonderful way to bring pleasure to your partner and to extend the lovemaking. I think eye contact is fabulous, and just being in eye contact with each other in a quiet way without words, it can be very deeply satisfying. And I think it's really fun to experiment with open eye lovemaking and even open eye orgasm, which is sometimes hard for some people to do, but it's a worthy endeavor to experiment with that. And I'm a big fan of changing the location. And sometimes, on the couch, not always in the bed. If you've got a yard that's got some privacy, to take, some cushions out in the yard and be outside. To go on romantic getaways, to stay in a hotel.
The backyard is better than the front yard.
Yeah, that would be more private, usually in the backyard. To go on romantic getaways. If you're on a budget, you can camp. If you're on a really tight budget, when your friends go out of town, they may let you come over to their house, so you're in a different environment. And anything that just mixes it up and brings a little novelty to it can be really stimulating.
I do want to say one more thing before we finish up, because I know we're running out of time.
Yeah.
That one of the conditions that really makes a big difference in terms of openness, safety, trust, and desire, which are all important ingredients to the experience, has to do with whether or not there are any things that are incomplete in our relationship. Meaning, if there's anything that is an ongoing issue that we haven't really adequately come to terms with yet, if it's a source of frustration or resentment or grudge holding, and I'm not saying that you have to have everything perfectly handled.
Would be too long to wait.
No, but
getting complete is an aphrodisiac.
Getting complete means that for the time being, I can put this aside and not have it impinge upon my ability to be fully present with you now. It's not pulling my attention away. It's not distracting me. I can put it aside for now, because if that isn't handled, then it's going to be very difficult to really be present without continually getting pulled into the resentment or the grudge or the frustration that we haven't adequately addressed yet. Mm-hmm. So that's another thing. But I noticed that we are running out of time. So all good things must come to an end, even Bloom talks. So anything that you want to say before we finish?
Yes, I want to encourage you to tell your friends about this presentation and tell them that they're archived. If you have friends that don't play on Facebook, to be able to go into the Facebook archives, you can tell them that they're all on YouTube as well. And we really appreciate it when you help spread the word about the free samples that we're giving out. And we want to tell you what our topic is for next week. We're going to speak about IDD, intimacy deficiency disorder, and its remedy. So thank you for listening. We wish you all the best. And remember, super sex.